Okay, guys, so I'm going to be talking about the colonial history of Kashmir, which is the setting for our final novel, Munnu. So, we're going to start in the 17th century, and before this time, Kashmir had been ruled by Hindu and Buddhist religions, but around 1580, the Islamic Mughals took control of Kashmir. Now, unlike the authoritarian Islamic regimes that we think of today, the Islamic Mughals actually believed in tolerance and the concept of a pluralist government, which this actually put them ahead of their time because these ideals were popular during the European Enlightenment, and that wouldn't start until around 1715, many years later. So, unfortunately, the Mughal Empire began to weaken in 1707 after the death of their leader, Aurangzeb. And during this time, while they were weakening, a ruler named Ahmad Shah Abdali rose to power in Afghanistan and began raiding the Mughal Empire. He performed at least 8 raids during which Kashmir was conquered by the Afghans. And so the Afghans ruled from 1752 to 1819, and they only ruled for 67 years, but during that time they had 28 different rulers, which is a lot of rulers for a relatively short period of time. So you can kind of see that they were already different from the Mughals, and they were known for their cruelty and oppression as well as their turbulent and violent rule. So moving on to the 18th century, the Afghans were eventually defeated by the Sikhs in 1819. But since the Afghans kind of spanned both the 17th and the 18th century, I included a picture of their empire on this slide so you can just see how much land they controlled. And you can see where there's Pakistan right there. And it was an extensive amount of land. So, the Sikhs, their first ruler was Ranjit Singh, here is an image of him in the top right. And the Sikh rule ended over 4 centuries of Muslim rule, which you would think, given the predominant Muslim population of Kashmir, this would cause some issues, but the Sikhs were pretty religiously tolerant. I'm not saying they were never contested, because they did make a few decisions, such as the banning of azans, and these are calls Muslims do for ritual prayers. They said you can't do those in public, which kind of upset some people, but on the whole, they were religiously tolerant, benevolent rulers, and the Sikh rule only ended in 1846. And that was after 26 years. Well, I should say the Sikh rule in Kashmir ended in 1846. And this is a big deal because in 1846, they signed the Treaty of Amritsar. And the Treaty of Amritsar was signed after the First Anglo-Sikh War, which was between Britain's East India Company and the Sikh Empire. And essentially, this treaty gave Kashmir to Britain. So, now that Kashmir is under British rule, we move into the 19th century, which is the Dogra rule with British supervision. Now, so the Dogra rule, Kashmir became it was under British suzerainty. And so a suzerain is a dominant state controlling the foreign relations of a vassal state, but allowing it sovereign authority in its internal affairs. So in layman's terms, that means Kashmir had a ruler, and that ruler had to listen to the Queen of England. And that's really as simple as it was. That ruler was ahead of day-to-day things, and they just had to listen to whatever the Queen really wanted to talk about during that time. So, the final ruler of the Dogra rule was Maharaja Hari Singh. And his rule ended in 1947 when Britain divided up India and Pakistan and left the area. Which, as we know, Britain, big disappearing act. So, I want to talk for a bit more on Maharaja Hari Singh because he was pretty important. So, a little history on him. He received his basic education at Mayo College in Kashmir before going on to receive British military training at a camp in Dehradun. And he became ruler when he was only 30 years old after the death of his uncle, who had died in 1925. Now, Britain had taken a bit of a special interest in Hari Singh, and so they kind of filled his head with a few more British ideas. So Hari Singh wanted to reform the government. And it's important to note that before he took control, Kashmir was a feudal government, which, if you look at the chart I have up here, it's a pretty primitive system. It's been around for a while. There's a king, and under him are the lords, and then under them are the knights, and then under them are the peasants or the serfs. And they all get things from each other. So, say the king or the ruler gets loyalty and military aid from his lords, and then in return, he gives them land and peasants. So, they all give each other things and receive things in return. It's a mutually beneficial system, but it's outdated and doesn't work very well in the modern world. So Hari Singh wanted to reform that, and he actually passed a law saying that all children had to get a modern education, and he started importing bureaucrats from other parts of British India to help improve the government. And his efforts were successful, and he actually really did improve the government and make it more modern. But he's not remembered favorably because in 1947, when Britain left India, Kashmir was supposed to join Pakistan because it's predominantly Muslim population, but instead, under pressure from the Nehru government, he signed an agreement called the Instrument of Accession with India, saying that Kashmir was temporarily under India control. And then in September 1947, there was a Jammu massacre where there was a mass murder of Muslims. So you can see why he's probably not really remembered very favorably. So that brings me to the conflict with Pakistan today. There was conflict in the 1940s, and there's still fighting today. In 1972, Pakistan and India agreed to a ceasefire, and they drew, if you can look at the map on the right, there's a red line through Kashmir. It's called the Line of Control. And basically, Pakistan owns everything to the left, and India owns everything to the right. And India is happy with this deal, and they want to accept the line of control as a new international boundary. But Pakistan refuses to accept this because India's side of the line has control of the Kashmir Valley, which is predominantly Muslim. And I have a picture of the Kashmir Valley on the left. And if they agreed to this, the Kashmir Valley would become a part of India, and they do not accept this. So that's kind of all I have for you guys, and I'm going to turn it over to Brennan now.
Hello, peeps. I hope everyone is doing well so far at home or wherever you may be. I know this is kind of odd doing a video, but we decided this would be the best way to present to you, even though we're all at home inside because of the pandemic. So I'm going to touch up on Kashmir under Indian occupation. I'm actually going to focus on some more recent times, actually, more recent years. And as we know, Munnu is a book that is set in the 1990s. But a lot of the events I will be talking about today actually take place within the last, a lot of the events are in the last 5 years. And then the first event I'm going to talk about, the POTA Act, actually was in the early 2000s. So I decided to choose my background also to match my partner because I wanted to use Kashmir as well. And so let's move on here. I am using OBS to record, so hopefully it is doing well. So the POTA Act was an anti-terrorist act enacted in 2002 in India. Um, it was prompted actually by the September 11th attacks in the United States. Shortly after, there were actually attacks against the Indian Parliament in December 13th, that left seven Parliament members dead. Um, in retaliation, the Indian Parliament came up with the Prevention of Terrorism Act, or POTA, in March of 2002. Um, there were some parts of POTA that were abused, such as the 180-day detention without a charge. So you could be literally arrested and taken to jail and held in detention for 180 days, and then be let go without any reasoning to why you were arrested. So there is a presumption of guilt. I know here in the United States we have innocent until proven guilty. With this act, it was if we think you're guilty, you're going into jail for 180 days and you're not getting out. Let me expand a little bit on that. So the effects of the POTA Act, fall 2001, there are terrorist attacks in Kashmir that killed thousands of people. So this was a reasoning for the POTA Act going into effect. There were also other potential threats. The Indian government mentioned the Tamil Tigers. Political figures were also arrested, a lot by rivals who already held government positions. And so this was used as a political move to help um, further one's political career. So often, um, political rivals were targets for imprisonment. Um, the central government always had a final say in how the court reacted to something. So the judiciary court system was all led by the central government, which took away any power the judicial government had. Within 8 months of POTA being enacted, 940 people had been arrested or imprisoned by POTA courts. However, POTA was repealed in 2004 because of the abuse that was seen by police and by political members already in the government. The next thing I want to talk about, and if you don't want to see some graphic images, I would fast forward until you see a different slide if you don't want to watch that. I'm going to be talking about mass blindings that happened in Kashmir. This was in 2016. Um, there wasn't a use of gas or anything like that. It was actually a use of pellets. So they were called non-lethal pellets. However, often buckshot was also used, and that also kills people. Um, but these non-lethal pellets were used by the Indian government to break up demonstrations. In 2016, 90 people had actually been killed by the Indian government, and by the end of 2016, I apologize, it's the 2019. 2016, 90 had been killed. By the end of 2016, 17,000 adults and children had been injured. Um, One of the doctors reported that they were doing 12 eye surgeries per day um, because the amount of people that were getting hurt by pellets. So these pellets embed themselves, and by the end of August 2016, 6,000 civilians had already been injured, and that was already 972 eye injuries within that month. Um, so I'm gonna bring some internet slides in. So here is kind of an idea of what a pellet gun looks like. As you can tell, it's kind of like a shotgun. So when it shoots, it just sprays out a bunch of pellets. It's not a single round, it's a bunch of pellets that just spray. So what I want to do today was also give some ideas of what the shots looked like. These are images of people next to X-rays where you can see where the pellets have embedded themselves into somebody right after they had been shot. And a lot of these pellets haven't been removed. Um, and the reason there's been so many blindings is around the eye area, the area of the eye. There have been lots of people that have been targeted in the face to get them to stop protesting. Um, when you have pellets enter the retina, I used to work in an optometrist. If something goes into the eye and hits the retina, you're done for. Even if you get shot in the eye, there's a very low chance you're going to be able to see. Um, and so that's why this is so, I won't say dangerous. It is dangerous, but why it's so effective and why we're seeing so many blindings in Kashmir. As you can see, this man has a pellet all the way back behind his eye. Um, so in conjunction with Munnu, since that's what we're talking about today, um, our author of Munnu actually wrote an op-ed in 2019 about the events that were going on in Kashmir. And in this instance, he describes Hiba, who is an 18-month-old girl. She's a toddler, um, who had been shot in the face with pellets. There's nothing a toddler is going to do that is going to harm someone holding a gun. It's Anyway, so here's his op-ed. I would recommend reading it. You can look it up by the New York Times. It gives some insight into what's happening in Kashmir. The art style looks familiar to what we've read in Munnu as well. But here he shares the story, but also shows where she had been shot, right here in her retina. Um, and so this method is very effective, but it's also very, very horrible for anyone that has to deal with it. Okay, so the next topic I'm going to talk about is actually a lockdown in Kashmir. This has nothing to do currently with COVID-19, but actually has a lot to do with the revoking of Article 370. The picture I have here are actually protests in Britain that happened in 2019. For the Kashmirian people. Um, but what Article 370, I want to go into this for you guys. Kashmir has basically been put under a lockdown um, from India. So the control that they had over their own government has been revoked. It's been taken away. They no longer have rights to their own constitution. India has sent military into the region, and throughout the fall of 2019, India shut down telecommunications, internet, everything, so people could not reach out to family or media. And during that time, they also arrested political leaders that they did not find favor with. Um, so, this is an article that I found very helpful. And so, basically, the last update that we have from this site is that 6 security personnel were actually hurt in a grenade attack. And as of today, the lockdown is still in effect. If you're wondering what Article 370 is, I've also got a source here as well. So basically, when we talked about when Britain left Kashmir, left India, they were given their own ability to have their own government as long as they listened to the British monarchy. Fast forward to 1947, Article 370 is written into law. Therefore, Kashmir had their own government that had to listen to India and that therefore had to listen to Britain. Um, Basically, if Kashmir didn't listen to India, India could revoke their rights, and this is exactly what happened. Was Article 370 gives Kashmir their own constitution, their own rights, their own control over their people, as long as they abided by what India wanted. Let me go back to my slides here. So basically, that happened in 2019 is still going on. Now I'm going to move into talking about our author a bit. I've been talking for about 10 and a half minutes. I know I need to hush, so this video is not too long for you guys. So Malik Shahzad is the author of Munnu. He was actually born in 1987. So he is 33 years old. I should know that. He's 10 years older than me. And so he shares his story of growing up in Kashmir in the 1990s. During his book, he talks a lot about the curfews and all the other things he had to deal with. Those are still going on, especially with this lockdown in Kashmir right now. That stuff is still happening today. So his story is set in my apologies, Srinagar, which is a main city in Kashmir. He uses black and white visuals in his graphic novel to help create an unsettling environment. Um, and rather than using people, he uses hangals, which are a local deer that are endangered because the Indian army has taken their home. Um, so take that as you will and keep that in mind. What parallels are there between hangals and the people of Kashmir? So Munnu actually was published in 2015. However, um, Malik reports that publishers were very slow to provide him an ISBN number, which is needed in order for a book to officially be published and be able to be sold. Um, and so he never found the reason for it, but beliefs are that the topic was harsh and a hard topic and takes a very hard stance on what's going on, and that could have led to the slow release of his book. I thank you guys for your time today. We appreciate um, you taking the time to look at this module, and we really hope you enjoy the Book of Munu, and we'll see you in discussion posts.